I was unconscious after the accident. My son abandoned me at the hospital and vanished. 7 days later, he returned and asked with fake concern, "My father still hasn't been discharged." The nurse answered with a single sentence that froze him in shock. "Your father was discharged 4 days ago. He's already gone." What my son didn't know was that while he was trying to destroy me, I had been watching him and planning everything. And now I was going to teach him a costly lesson so he'd learn I'm not someone to mess with. Thank you for being here. Quick question, where are you watching from? Drop your location below. Now a disclaimer, this is a fictional story created for entertainment and insight. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. But the message about trust betrayal and protecting yourself deeply meaningful. Let's begin. I am Patrick Sullivan. I'm 60 years old, and I need to tell you about the night everything changed. It was a cold, wet November night in Portland, the kind of night where the rain doesn't just fall, it hammers down, turning every road into a slick, black mirror. I was driving my silver sedan along Cornell Road, that narrow, winding stretch through the West Hills. I'd made that drive 100 times before. I knew every curve by heart, but that night my car had other plans. I approached a sharp bend and tapped the brake pedal. The way you're supposed to in wet conditions, light pressure, steady control. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. Still nothing. The pedal sank to the floor like it was made of air. My stomach dropped. The sedan kept sliding forward, tires skimming across the rain-slicked asphalt. I yanked the steering wheel. No response. The guardrail rushed toward me, metal gleaming in my headlights. Then the world flipped. The car smashed through the rail and plunged into the ravine. My body slammed forward. The airbag exploded in my face. Pain shot through my ribs, my head. Everything went white, then black, and then silence. I don't know how long I was out. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. When I came to, everything was muffled and wrong. Blood dripped into my eye. My chest screamed with every breath. Through the shattered windshield, I saw headlights above me, bright, high-mounted, cutting through the rain. Someone had stopped. I heard a car door open, footsteps. Slow, steady. A figure appeared at the edge of the ravine, silhouetted against the headlights. Tall, broad-shouldered. It was Jordan, my son. Relief washed over me. Thank God. He'd help. He'd get me out, but Jordan didn't move. He stood there, hands in his pockets, staring down at the wreck, staring at me. He didn't shout, didn't rush down. He just watched. For what felt like forever. Finally, he pulled out his phone. I could barely hear him over the ringing in my ears. "Yeah, there's been an accident on Cornell Road. Single vehicle, driver's unconscious. You should send someone." His voice was calm, flat, like he was ordering a pizza. He hung up, looked at me one more time. Then he turned around, got back in his car, and drove away. The headlights disappeared, and I was alone in the rain. I don't remember much after that. The ambulance, the EMTs pulling me out of the wreck, the sirens. It's all a blur. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in a hospital bed at Legacy Emmanuel, fluorescent lights burning into my eyes. A nurse was adjusting my IV. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. "Easy, Mr. Sullivan," she said gently. "You've been through a lot." "My son," I rasped. "Where's my son?" She hesitated, glanced at the door. "He brought you in," she said carefully. "Left your wallet at the front desk. Didn't sign any paperwork. Didn't stay. Didn't stay." Those two words echoed in my head long after she left the room. It wasn't until much later that I learned what Jordan did after he left the hospital. He didn't go home. He sat in his car in the parking lot, engine idling, rain drumming on the roof. It was 2 a.m. The city was asleep. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. One transfer request, $6.8 million. From the Sullivan Family Trust Fund, the trust I'd built over decades. The one that was supposed to go to him eventually. He must have thought I was dead, or close enough that it didn't matter. He pressed submit. The system flagged it. Pending approval required. It needed a second signature. Mine. Jordan stared at the screen. Tried again. Same result. He swore under his breath, slammed his hand against the steering wheel. Tried a third time. Nothing. Finally, after 20 minutes of trying to force it through, he gave up, threw his phone onto the passenger seat, and drove off into the night. 7 days later, Jordan came back to the hospital. He walked through the front doors, wearing an expensive charcoal coat cashmere, tailored the kind that costs more than most people make in a month. His shoes clicked sharply on the polished floor as he approached the nurse's station. "I'm here to see Patrick Sullivan," he said smoothly. "Room 302. I'm his son." The nurse behind the desk looked up. It was Rachel Bennett, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who didn't miss a thing. She studied him for a moment, then glanced at her computer screen. Patrick Sullivan," she repeated slowly. "Yes, my father." Rachel's fingers paused over the keyboard. Then she looked back at him, her face completely neutral. "Your father was discharged 4 days ago." Jordan blinked. "What?" He checked himself out. "Day 2. "That's not possible," Jordan said, his voice rising slightly. "He was in critical condition. He couldn't just—" "He did," Rachel said calmly. Jordan stared at her. His jaw tightened. "Where did he go?" "I don't have that information." "You don't—" He stopped himself, forced a tight smile. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mr. Sullivan." For a moment, Jordan didn't move. His hands gripped the edge of the counter. Then his face went pale. He straightened up, took a step back. "Fine," he said curtly. "Thank you." He turned and walked toward the exit, fast. His expensive coat fluttered behind him as he pushed through the automatic doors and disappeared into the gray Portland drizzle. Rachel Bennett stood at the nurse's station, arms folded, watching him go. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, her sharp eyes tracking him through the glass doors until he vanished into the rain. Her expression was cold, unreadable, and she stayed like that long after he was gone. 20 hours after the crash, it was the steady beeping of a heart monitor that pulled me back. Beep, beep, beep. I opened my eyes. Fluorescent lights, white ceiling tiles, the antiseptic smell of a hospital. Legacy Emmanuel. Day 1, 8 o'clock at night. My head throbbed. Every breath sent a sharp ache through my ribs. I tried to sit up, but my body protested. A hand gently pressed my shoulder back down. "Easy, Mr. Sullivan." I turned my head. A doctor stood beside the bed, 50s, graying hair, kind eyes. His name tag read, Dr. Peter Monroe. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. "Mild traumatic brain injury, bruised ribs. No serious head trauma, but you need to take it slow." I nodded weakly. My throat was dry. "My son," I croaked. Did he?" Dr. Monroe glanced at the nurse standing by the door. It was Rachel, the same one who'd been there earlier. She shook her head slightly. "No one came with you, Mr. Sullivan," she said quietly. "And no one's called to check on you." No one. The words hit me harder than the airbag had. Dr. Monroe left after a few more reassurances. Rachel lingered, adjusting my IV, her expression carefully neutral. Before she left, she set a tablet on the tray beside my bed. "In case you need to reach anyone," she said. I waited until the room was empty. Then I picked up the tablet. My hands shook as I logged into my email. 17 unread messages. Most were junk, but one caught my eye immediately. "Security alert pending transaction requires approval, sender First National Bank of Oregon." Time sent 3:47 a.m. I opened it. Transaction details. Amount $6,800,000. 00 from Sullivan Family Trust Fund to account number 47389-BVI offshore, British Virgin Islands, initiated by Jordan M. Sullivan status pending. Secondary authorization required. I stared at the screen. $6.8 million. Initiated at 3:47 in the morning. Less than 2 hours after the crash, Jordan had tried to empty the trust fund while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. While he thought I was dying or dead. My chest tightened. Not from the bruised ribs, from something much worse. And then, like a trapdoor opening beneath me, a memory surfaced. 3 weeks ago. Late afternoon. The kitchen in our Eastmoreland house. Warm light streaming through the windows. I'd just gotten home from a meeting. Jordan was waiting for me. "Dad, we need to talk about your car." I looked up from the mail. "What about it?" "The brakes. They're not responding right. I noticed it when I borrowed it last week." "The brakes are fine, Jordan. I just had the car serviced 6 months ago. I'm telling you something's off." His tone was insistent. Almost urgent. "I know a guy, a mechanic. He's good. Let me take it in, just to be safe." I hesitated. I didn't like the idea of someone else handling my car, but Jordan seemed genuinely concerned. "Fine," I said finally. "But make it quick." He smiled. "I'll take care of it tonight." He took my keys off the counter and left. That night he brought the car back, parked it in the driveway, tossed the keys onto the kitchen table. "All set," he said, but there was something in his expression, something I couldn't quite read. I'd brushed it off. Now lying in that hospital bed, the pieces fell into place. He hadn't taken the car to a mechanic. He'd taken it somewhere else, somewhere he could cut the brake line. 3 weeks ago, my son had sabotaged my car, and then he'd waited, patiently, for the right moment. A rainy night, a dark road, a sharp turn. I felt sick. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a moment of desperation. This was premeditated. Jordan had planned to kill me. I grabbed my phone from the bedside table. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to dial. It rang twice. "Patrick." Richard Wade's voice was sharp with concern. "Where the hell are you? I heard about the accident." Richard listened to me. My voice was steadier than I felt. "I need you to come to Legacy Emmanuel now. Don't tell anyone. And bring discharge papers." There was a pause. "Patrick, what's going on?" "Jordan tried to kill me." Silence. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Richard said. I hung up. Then, with my heart pounding, I opened my banking app and navigated to the security settings for my home safe. The one in my office. The one that held legal documents, financial records, and the backup key to the trust fund accounts. The safe had a digital lock, remotely accessible. I changed the code. From 041285, Catherine's birthday, to a random string of numbers Jordan would never guess. If he tried to get into that safe, he'd be locked out. At 10 o'clock, Richard arrived. He didn't ask questions. He just handled the paperwork, signed me out under a medical waiver, and walked me through a side exit to his car. We drove through the rain in silence. When we pulled up in front of Barbara Wells's modest house in the Woodstock neighborhood, Richard finally spoke. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me prove it," I said quietly. He nodded. Barbara met us at the door. She didn't ask why. She just opened it wider and let me in. As I sat down in her small, warm living room, wrapped in a blanket she'd pulled from a closet, one thought consumed me. Jordan had planned this at least 3 weeks in advance. 3 weeks of looking me in the eye, sharing meals, pretending. And the question that terrified me most wasn't why. It was how many other signs had I missed. It was 3 in the morning on day 2 when Richard pulled up in front of Barbara Wells's house. The Woodstock neighborhood was quiet. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick, reflecting the glow of streetlights. Barbara's house was a small craftsman bungalow, tucked between 2 larger homes with a narrow front porch and flower boxes that even in November looked cared for. Richard helped me out of the car. My ribs screamed with every movement, but I bit down and kept walking. Barbara opened the door before we reached it. She was 58, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She'd been our neighbor in Eastmoreland for 15 years. She and Catherine had been close book club weekend gardening, long conversations over tea. She looked at me, then at Richard, and stepped aside without a word. "Come in," she said simply. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books. She led us into a small living room with a worn couch, a brick fireplace, and shelves lined with novels and framed photographs. She gestured for me to sit. "I'll make tea," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. Richard sat across from me, his lawyer's mind already working. "Patrick, we need to talk strategy." I nodded, but I was exhausted. Every part of me hurt. Barbara returned with 3 mugs of chamomile tea and sat down in an armchair. She looked at me expectantly. "Tell me," she said. So I did. I told her everything. The crash on Cornell Road, the brake failure, Jordan standing at the edge of the ravine waiting before he called 911, the $6.8 million transfer attempt, the flashback to 3 weeks earlier when Jordan had taken my car to fix the brakes. Barbara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her mug down carefully. "Jordan's changed," she said quietly. I looked up. "What do you mean, about 2 years ago? You remember when he started dating that woman?" I frowned. "You mean, I don't know her name," Barbara said. "But I saw her a few times, always dressed expensively, always on her phone. She had this look, like she was calculating something." Richard leaned forward. "Did Catherine ever mention her?" Barbara's expression softened at Catherine's name. Catherine was worried. She said Jordan seemed different around her, more secretive, more reckless. My chest tightened. Catherine had noticed, and I'd missed it. "Do you know anything else about her?" Richard asked. Barbara shook her head. "Only that after she came into his life, Jordan started asking you for money more often. Catherine told me." Richard and I exchanged a glance. "We need evidence," Richard said, shifting back into lawyer mode. "2 things. First, the physical evidence, the brake line from the car. If it was cut, that's attempted murder. Second, financial motive. If Jordan's in debt, that explains the $6.8 million. I nodded slowly. "But if we go to the police now, Jordan will say I'm confused, traumatized, maybe even senile. He'll twist it." "Then we build the case first," Richard said firmly. "Airtight. So when we do go to the police, there's no room for doubt." Barbara stood and walked to the bookshelf. She picked up a framed photograph and handed it to me. It was Catherine, smiling, standing in her garden hands covered in dirt, holding a basket of tomatoes. I stared at the photo, and something inside me broke. I'd been holding it together through the crash, the hospital, the revelation. But seeing her face, I couldn't anymore. Barbara gently took the photo back and set it on the shelf. She didn't say anything. She just rested a hand on my shoulder for a moment, then left the room. Richard cleared his throat. "Get some rest, Patrick. We'll figure this out." I slept for a few hours on Barbara's couch, but it was restless, full of fractured dreams. By the evening of day 3, I was awake and clear-headed again. Barbara had set up her spare bedroom with a small desk and her old laptop. I sat down and logged into my home security system. I'd installed cameras 2 years ago after a string of break-ins in Eastmoreland. 4 cameras: front door, back door, office, and garage. I pulled up the live feed, and there he was, Jordan. He was in my office, my house, standing in front of the wall, safe. I leaned closer to the screen, my pulse pounding. He was trying different combinations on the digital keypad. His face was tight with frustration. He tried once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. He slammed his fist against the safe. Tried again, still locked. Then he stepped back and kicked it. Hard. The metal didn't budge. "Damn it!" His voice came through the laptop speakers, tinny but clear. He pulled out his phone and made a call. I held my breath. "Yeah, it's me," Jordan said, pacing in front of the safe. "No, I don't have it yet. The old man changed the code." Pause. "I know I need more time." Jordan's voice rose. "He's not dead. But I'll figure something else out." Another pause. Jordan ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "I know how much I owe you. Just give me 2 weeks. I have a plan." Silence. 2 weeks, Jordan repeated. "I swear." He hung up, stared at the safe one more time, then turned and walked out of the frame. I sat frozen. "I know how much I owe you." Jordan was in debt, serious debt, to someone dangerous enough that he was willing to kill me for the money. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to move. I navigated to the security system's cloud storage and downloaded the entire video file. Front door, office, everything. Then I uploaded it to a separate encrypted cloud account Richard had set up for me earlier. Backup, evidence, proof. Jordan had just confessed on camera that he'd tried to kill me. But as I stared at the screen, a cold realization settled over me. This video proved intent. It proved motive. But it didn't prove method. I still needed the physical evidence. The brake line, the car. My wrecked sedan was currently sitting in an impound lot somewhere in Portland. And according to standard procedure, it would be held for 72 hours before being transferred to a salvage yard. I pulled up my phone and checked the timestamp from the crash. November 14th, 11:43 p.m. It was now November 16th, 9:30 p.m. I had less than 24 hours before my car, and the evidence was destroyed. The pounding on Barbara's front door came at 9 o'clock on the morning of day 4. 3 sharp, aggressive knocks. I was in the kitchen drinking coffee, my ribs still aching with every breath. Barbara looked up from her newspaper. Richard, who'd stayed overnight on the couch, straightened immediately. "Stay here," I said. But I already knew who it was. I walked to the door and opened it. Jordan stood on the porch, his expensive coat soaked from the morning drizzle, his face twisted in what was supposed to look like concern. "Dad," he said, his voice loud, theatrical. "Thank God. I've been worried sick about you." I didn't move. "How did you find me?" Jordan's expression flickered, just for a second. Then the mask slid back into place. I've been calling everyone, checking hospitals. Then I saw a food delivery charge on your credit card last night. DoorDash. This address. Of course. I'd ordered dinner for Barbara and me the night before. Stupid. I'm fine, Jordan, I said flatly. You can go. He stepped forward, trying to push past me into the house. Dad, we need to talk. You just disappeared from the hospital. You scared me. I blocked the doorway. Cut it, Jordan. I know what you did. His face changed. The fake concern melted away, replaced by something colder, harder. You don't know anything, he said quietly. I know you tried to transfer $6.8 million 2 hours after the crash. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket, a printout Richard had made from my bank records, and held it up. While I was unconscious, while you thought I was dying, Jordan stared at the paper, his jaw tightened. You don't understand, he said, his voice dropping. I'm in trouble, bad trouble, with bad people. I needed that money to protect us, to protect you. I almost laughed. Protect me. You cut my brake line, Jordan. His eyes widened. Just a fraction. But it was enough. You're confused, he said quickly. The accident, head trauma, it's making you paranoid. You took my car 3 weeks ago. I said, my voice steady. You told me the brakes needed fixing. You took the keys, and you sabotaged it. Jordan took a step back. His expression shifted again, this time to anger. You can't prove that. I have the bank transfer. I have the security footage from my house. I have you on camera breaking into my office trying to crack my safe. For a moment, Jordan said nothing. Then he smiled. It was a cold, ugly smile. You think anyone's going to believe you? He said softly. A 60-year-old man who just survived a major car accident, who's clearly suffering from head trauma, you really think people will take your word over mine? He leaned in closer. I'll tell them you're losing it, that the crash scrambled your brain. I'll get a doctor to testify. I'll petition for guardianship, and then I'll have access to everything. My blood ran cold. Get out, I said. Jordan didn't move. That money is mine, Dad. I've earned it. I've waited for it, and I'm going to get it. Get out! He straightened, adjusting his coat. You know what Mom would say if she were here. She'd tell you to help me. She'd want me to have that money. Something inside me snapped. Don't you dare bring her into this. Jordan's smile widened. Why not? She loved me more than she ever loved you. I slammed the door in his face. My hands were shaking. My chest was tight. Barbara appeared in the hallway, her expression grim. He's gone, she said quietly, peering through the window. For now. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. That evening, my phone exploded. Texts, emails, missed calls. I picked it up, confused. Then I saw the notification. Jordan Sullivan is live on Facebook. I opened the app. There he was, sitting in what looked like a coffee shop, his face somber, his eyes red as if he'd been crying. The viewer count was climbing 1,200, 1,500, 2,000. I don't usually do this, Jordan was saying, his voice breaking slightly. But I need to reach out to people who know my dad, who care about him. My stomach dropped. 4 days ago, my father was in a terrible car accident. He's alive, thank God. But the head trauma, it's changed him. Jordan paused, wiping his eyes. He's convinced that I, his own son, tried to hurt him, that I'm trying to steal from him. He's paranoid, delusional. He won't let me help him. He won't even tell me where he is. The comments section flooded with sympathy. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Head injuries can do that. My uncle had the same thing. You need to get him professional help ASAP." Jordan nodded as if reading the comments. "I'm trying, but he refuses, and I'm scared. I'm scared he's going to hurt himself, or someone else." More comments. "Call the police. Get a court order. He needs to be in a facility where he can be monitored." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with rage. He was doing it. He was destroying me, publicly. My phone buzzed. A call from one of my business partners, a man named Douglas Waverly, someone I'd worked with for 10 years. "Patrick," Douglas said when I answered. His voice was careful, distant. "I just saw your son's video." "It's a lie," I said immediately. "Patrick, I'm not saying it isn't. But until this is resolved, I think we need to pause our current projects. Just temporarily." Douglas. "I'm sorry, Patrick. I have investors to answer to. If there's any question about your mental competency, I can't risk it." He hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. Jordan had just cost me my reputation, my business relationships, my credibility, and he'd done it in under 20 minutes. Another notification buzzed. A text from Richard. "Found the car. Rivergate Salvage Yard, North Portland. But we have a problem. They're crushing it at midnight tonight. We've got 4 hours." I read the message twice. 4 hours. Jordan's live stream was still playing in the background, his voice smooth and concerned, spinning his lies to thousands of people. But the fury that had been building in my chest suddenly crystallized into something colder. Clarity. 4 hours to secure the evidence that would prove my son had tried to kill me. 4 hours to make sure he didn't win. It was 8 o'clock on the evening of day 4 when Richard's text came through. I was sitting on Barbara's couch, my phone still buzzing with notifications from Jordan's livestream. My ribs ached with every breath. My head throbbed. But none of that mattered anymore. I read Richard's message again. "Found the car. Rivergate Salvage Yard. They're crushing it at midnight. Jordan paid them $500 cash to move it up. We've got 4 hours." 4 hours. I pushed myself to my feet, wincing as pain shot through my side. Barbara looked up from her book. "What's wrong?" "We need to go," I said. "Now." Before we left, I made one more call. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Detective Aaron Brooks, Portland Police Bureau. Leave a message." I took a breath. "Detective Brooks, my name is Patrick Sullivan. I was in a single-vehicle accident on Cornell Road 7 days ago. I have reason to believe it wasn't an accident. I have evidence that someone sabotaged my car. I'll be coming to the station tomorrow morning with documentation. Please call me back." I left my number and hung up. Richard arrived 10 minutes later. He'd brought a toolbox, flashlights, bolt cutters, heavy-duty gloves, and a hacksaw. "You sure about this?" he asked as we climbed into his car. "I'm sure." We drove north through the rain toward the industrial district along the Willamette River. Rivergate was a desolate stretch of warehouses, shipping yards, and scrap metal operations, the kind of place where things went to disappear. At 10:30 p.m., we pulled up half a mile from the salvage yard and parked on a side street. Richard handed me a flashlight and a pair of gloves. "Stay close. Stay quiet." We walked along the edge of the chain-link fence until we found a section partially hidden by overgrown blackberry bushes. Richard pulled out the bolt cutters and snipped through the links one by one until there was a gap wide enough to squeeze through. My ribs screamed as I crouched and crawled under the fence. I bit down hard, tasting blood, but kept moving. Inside the yard was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered glass. Rows and rows of wrecked cars, stacked 3 high in some places, stretched out under flickering floodlights. "There," Richard whispered, pointing. "In the far corner, near a massive hydraulic car crusher, I saw it. My silver sedan. The front end was crumpled. The windshield shattered, but it was still intact. We made our way over, stepping carefully around oil slicks and broken glass. My heart was pounding. Every sound felt too loud. When we reached the car, I stopped. This was it. The moment of truth. "I'll keep watch," Richard said. "You get under." I nodded. Getting down on my back was agony. My ribs felt like they were on fire, but I gritted my teeth, lay flat on the cold, wet ground, and slid myself under the car. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the undercarriage. Oil, rust, twisted metal, and then I saw it. The brake line. It ran along the driver's side, a thin rubber hose reinforced with metal braiding. But about 2 feet from the master cylinder, there was a clean, deliberate cut. Not a tear, not a rupture from the impact. A cut. Sharp, precise. Made with a blade. I stared at it, my breath catching. This wasn't wear and tear. This wasn't an accident. This was premeditated murder. "Patrick!" Richard's voice was urgent. "You okay?" "I found it," I said hoarsely. "Take pictures. Every angle." Richard crouched beside me and aimed his phone camera under the car. The flash lit up the brake line in stark detail. He took a dozen shots, close-ups, wide angles, reference points. "Now cut a section," I said. "We need a sample." Richard pulled out the hacksaw and carefully sawed through the brake line about 6 inches on either side of the cut. He wrapped the piece in a plastic bag and stuffed it into his jacket pocket. "Done," he said. "Let's go." We started back toward the fence, and then we heard it. Footsteps, heavy boots on gravel. "Hey, who's there?" A security guard flashlight swinging in our direction. "Run," Richard hissed. We bolted. Pain exploded in my side as I ran, but I didn't stop. We reached the gap in the fence, squeezed through, and kept going until we hit Richard's car. He started the engine and pulled away, tires screeching just as the guard reached the fence line. We didn't speak until we were back on the main road. "That was too close," Richard said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We got it," I said, breathless. "That's all that matters." At 5:30 a.m. on day 5, we walked into the Portland Police Bureau's North Precinct. Detective Aaron Brooks was waiting. He was in his mid-40s, graying at the temples, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He led us to a small interview room and sat down across from us. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, "you left me an interesting voicemail." Richard opened his briefcase and laid everything out on the table. The timeline. The bank transfer request, $6.8 million, submitted 2 hours after the crash. The security footage of Jordan breaking into my office trying to crack the safe. The photographs of the brake line showing the clean, deliberate cut. And finally, the physical sample itself, sealed in the plastic bag. Detective Brooks studied each item carefully. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he looked up. "This is attempted murder," he said quietly. "Yes," I said. "And the suspect is your son?" "Yes." Brooks leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "I'm going to open a formal investigation. I'll send the brake line to our forensics lab for analysis. I'll subpoena your bank records and the security footage, and I'll need a full statement from you." "Anything you need," I said. Brooks nodded. Then his expression grew serious. "Mr. Sullivan, if your son realizes we're investigating him, he may become desperate." Desperate people do dangerous things. Where are you staying right now? With a friend. Keep it that way. Don't go home. Don't contact him. Let us handle this. I nodded. Brooks stood and shook my hand. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. Richard and I walked out of the precinct, just as the sun was rising over Portland. The rain had stopped. The sky was turning pale gold. For the first time in 7 days, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night of the crash. Hope. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Detective Brooks and the full weight of the Portland Police Bureau were now on my side. The next 10 days, day 7 through day 15, I stayed hidden at Barbara's house while Detective Brooks quietly built the case that would bring my son to justice. I didn't go outside, didn't contact anyone except Richard and Brooks, didn't post on social media. As far as the world was concerned, Patrick Sullivan had vanished. And while I waited, Brooks worked. On day 7, the forensics report came back. Brooks called me from the lab. His voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the edge of satisfaction in it. The brake line was cut with a precision tool, he said. A box cutter or utility knife. Clean, deliberate. This wasn't wear and tear, Mr. Sullivan. This was sabotage. I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed officially scientifically made it real in a way it hadn't been before. What's next? I asked. Now we follow the money, Brooks said. On day 9, the financial subpoena results arrived. Richard and I sat at Barbara's kitchen table as Brooks spread the documents out in front of us. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications. And there it was in black and white. Jordan owed $1.4 million. Gambling debts. Brooks said, tapping one of the pages. He's been borrowing from loan sharks, unlicensed lenders operating out of underground poker clubs in Southeast Portland. The kind of people who don't take no for an answer. I stared at the numbers. $1.4 million. How had I not known? Look at the timeline, Richard said, leaning forward. The debt started piling up about 2 years ago. Small at first, a few thousand here and there. But then 18 months ago it skyrocketed. Brooks nodded. And 3 weeks before your accident, he made a payment of $50,000, probably to buy himself more time. 3 weeks before the accident. The same week, Jordan had insisted on taking my car to get the brakes fixed. He was desperate, I said quietly. Desperate enough to kill, Brooks replied. On day 11, Brooks tracked down the mechanic shop Jordan had mentioned, the one with the guy he knew. Except it didn't exist. The address Jordan had given me led to an abandoned garage in North Portland. No business license. No registered employees. Just a rundown building with boarded-up windows and a rusted chain-link fence. Brooks sent a team to sweep the place. They found tire tracks, oil stains, evidence that someone had been working there recently. But the owner, if there ever was one, had disappeared 2 weeks before the crash. Ghost shop? Brooks said when he called to update me. Whoever Jordan was working with, they're long gone. Do you think they'll come back? I asked. Not if they're smart, Brooks said. But we'll keep an eye on it. By day 13, Brooks had compiled everything into a formal case file. Forensic evidence, financial records, security footage, witness statements. But he wasn't ready to arrest Jordan yet. We need him to make a mistake. Brooks explained when he came to Barbara's house to brief us. Right now he thinks he's getting away with it. He thinks you're hiding because you're scared. Or confused. If we move too soon, a good defense attorney could argue circumstantial evidence. We need something definitive. So what do we do? I asked. Brooks leaned back in his chair thinking. We make him desperate. We put pressure on him. And we wait for him to crack. That's when I had the idea. There's a gala this weekend, I said. The Portland Business Association. It's at Hotel Lucia. Jordan's planning to attend. Richard raised an eyebrow. How do you know? I saw it on his social media, I said. He's been posting about it, talking about how he's looking for emergency loans to help care for his sick father. Brooks's eyes sharpened. He's using your condition to scam investors. Exactly, I said. But what if I show up? Richard sat up straighter. Patrick, that's dangerous. It's also smart, Brooks said slowly. If you appear healthy, coherent, in control, it undermines everything Jordan's been saying. It exposes him as a liar in front of the entire Portland business community. And it might force him to do something reckless, I added. Brooks nodded. We'll have officers on site, plainclothes. If he tries anything, we'll be ready. What about credibility? Richard asked. Jordan's been spreading rumors that Patrick's mentally unstable. We need someone to vouch for him publicly. I thought for a moment, then I reached for my phone. I know someone. Henry Blackwell answered on the second ring. Henry was 70 years old, a real estate developer, who'd been my business partner for over 20 years. He'd known Catherine. He'd watched Jordan grow up, and he had a reputation in Portland that was beyond reproach. Patrick, he said when he heard my voice. Where the hell have you been? I told him everything. The crash, the sabotage, the money, Jordan's lies. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Henry said, that son of a bitch. I need your help, Henry. Name it. The gala on Saturday. I'm going to be there, and I need someone to stand up and tell the truth. Someone people will believe. Henry didn't hesitate. I'll be there, and I'll make damn sure everyone knows you're not the one who's lost his mind. On the evening of day 15, Detective Brooks came to Barbara's house one last time before the gala. He set the case file on the kitchen table, thick, organized, damning. This is solid, he said. Forensics financials motive opportunity. When we arrest him, it'll stick. When? I asked. Brooks looked at me across the table. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Your son is smart, Mr. Sullivan, he said. But desperate people make mistakes, and I think it's time we give him the opportunity to make the biggest mistake of his life. Patrick's case is airtight. Forensics, financials, footage, everything's ready. But Detective Brooks isn't arresting Jordan yet. He's letting him walk into a trap at the gala. If you're still here, comment "ready" below quick note. This is fiction dramatized for impact. Not for you, exit now. Otherwise, the confrontation starts next. The 7 days between day 15 and day 20 were the longest of my life. I stayed at Barbara's house, pacing the small living room, rehearsing what I would say, how I would stand, how I would face the man my son had become. On the morning of day 17, I found myself staring at a photograph Barbara kept on her mantel. It was from my wedding. Catherine and me standing under an archway of white roses, her hand in mine, her smile brighter than the summer sun. I picked up the frame and studied her face. Well, I don't know if I can do this, I said quietly. Barbara, who'd been reading in the corner, looked up. Catherine would want you to, she said gently. I nodded. She was right. Catherine had always been braver than me, stronger. If she were here, she'd tell me to stand up, to fight. I set the photograph back on the mantel. Okay, I said. I'm ready. On day 18, Detective Brooks called with an update. Your son just bought a new suit, Brooks said. Charged it to his last remaining credit card, $2,400, Tom Ford. I frowned. He's broke. Why would he? Because he's putting on a show, Brooks said. He's been posting on social media all week, talking about how he's about to close a major investment deal to help care for his ailing father. He's setting the stage. For what? For one last con, Brooks said. He's going to charm someone at that gala into giving him money, and then he's going to disappear. My jaw tightened. Not if I can help it. The evening of day 20 arrived. Hotel Lucia was one of Portland's most elegant venues, a historic building downtown with vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with original artwork. Tonight, it was hosting the annual Portland Business Association Gala, and the guest list read like a who's who of the city's wealthiest and most influential people. Over 200 guests. CEOs, investors, politicians, philanthropists, and somewhere in that crowd was Jordan. Barbara and I arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance Brooks had arranged. We made our way up to the mezzanine level where we could watch the ballroom below without being seen. The event was already in full swing. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The crowd mingled, laughing, shaking hands, making deals. And then I saw him. Jordan. He stood near the center of the room, dressed in his new suit, a glass of champagne in one hand, his expression warm and charismatic. He was talking to a small group of older men, successful-looking, the kind of people who wrote seven-figure checks without blinking. There, I said, pointing. Barbara leaned forward, peering over the railing. Who's he talking to? I squinted. One of the men looked familiar. Douglas Waverly, I said quietly. Douglas Waverly was a banker, one of the most powerful in Portland. He ran a private investment firm that managed billions. He was also someone I'd worked with years ago. A good man. Honest, trusting. Exactly the kind of person Jordan would target. I watched as Jordan gestured animatedly, his face full of concern. He leaned in closer to Waverly, speaking earnestly. Waverly nodded, his expression sympathetic. Then Waverly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. My stomach dropped. He's going to transfer money, I said. Barbara grabbed my arm. Patrick, we have to do something. If Jordan gets that money, he'll be gone before sunrise, I said. We have to move. Now. I turned and headed for the stairs. Chatisserin. Patrick, wait. Barbara called after me, but I was already moving. I descended the grand marble staircase that led from the mezzanine down into the main ballroom. My heart was pounding. My ribs still ached with every breath. But I didn't stop. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the crowd began to notice. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the room. Is that Patrick Sullivan? I thought he was, wasn't he? The string quartet faltered, then stopped playing entirely. The ballroom fell silent, and then across the room, Jordan turned around. He saw me. For a split second, his face went blank. Then his eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It fell, slowly, tumbling end over end through the air, the crystal catching the light from the chandeliers above, refracting it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. And then it hit the marble floor. The sound was sharp, violent, like a gunshot cutting through the silence. Champagne exploded across the polished stone. Shards of glass scattered in every direction. The string quartet went completely silent. The waiters froze mid-step. Every conversation in the room died. And suddenly, 200 of the wealthiest, most powerful people in Portland turned as one to stare at us. Father and son. standing 20 feet apart in the center of the ballroom. After 3 weeks filled with lies, manipulation, attempted murder, and betrayal, the shattered champagne glass glittered on the marble floor between us like broken promises. Jordan stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes darting around the silent ballroom. 200 people stared, waiting. I took a step forward. Jordan's expression shifted. The panic melted away, replaced by something rehearsed. He opened his arms and rushed toward me. "Dad, oh my God, Dad, I've been so worried." I held up my hand. He stopped. "Don't," I said quietly. The crowd leaned in, sensing something was wrong. Jordan tried again, his voice breaking. "Dad, please, you need help. The accident, it's affected you." "I'm fine, Jordan," I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "In fact, I've never been more clear-headed in my life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jordan's smile faltered. "Dad, you're confused." "3 weeks ago, you cut the brake line on my car," I said. "You stood at the side of Cornell Road and watched me crash. You waited before calling 911. And while I was unconscious in the hospital, you tried to transfer $6.8 million from my trust fund." The room exploded in whispers. Jordan's face went white. "That's not Dad, you're sick. You don't know what you're saying." "I have forensic evidence," I continued. "I have financial records. I have security footage of you breaking into my office trying to steal from my safe. And I have the Portland Police Department building a case against you for attempted murder and fraud." The whispers turned into shocked exclamations. Jordan took a step back, shaking his head. No, this is insane. He's been traumatized. He doesn't. Patrick is telling the truth." The voice came from the side of the room. Henry Blackwell stepped forward. He was 70 years old, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and one of the most respected men in Portland. When he spoke, people listened. "I've known Patrick Sullivan for over 20 years. Henry said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I've reviewed the evidence he's provided, the forensic reports, the financial subpoenas, the security footage. Patrick is not confused. He's not ill. He is the victim of a calculated and vicious crime committed by his own son." The room went silent again. Henry turned to face the crowd. "As of this moment, I am formally notifying everyone here that any financial dealings with Jordan Sullivan are invalid. Any loans, any investments, any agreements, they are fraudulent and will not be honored." Douglas Waverly, still holding his phone, slowly put it back in his pocket. He looked at Jordan with disgust and walked away. One by one, the other investors did the same. Jordan stood alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by broken glass and broken lies. You... His voice was hoarse. "You bastard." "I'm your father," I said quietly, "and you tried to kill me." Jordan's face twisted. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But then he looked around at the crowd, at the cold, judgmental faces, and something inside him cracked. He turned and ran. He pushed through the crowd, shoving people out of the way, and disappeared through the exit. No one tried to stop him. The ballroom erupted in conversation. Barbara appeared at my side, her hand on my arm. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. 2 days later, at 2:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was Detective Brooks. "He's at your office," Brooks said. "Right now, Pearl District. We've got units surrounding the building." I sat up in bed. "What's he doing?" "Breaking in. He's looking for your company seal, the one you use to authorize checks. He's trying to forge a payment to himself. My jaw tightened. Is he armed? No. But he's desperate, and desperate men do unpredictable things. I'm on my way. I arrived at my Pearl District office 20 minutes later. Police cars were parked around the block, lights off, waiting. Brooks met me outside. We've got him on camera, Brooks said, handing me a tablet. He broke in through the back entrance. He's in your office right now. I looked at the screen. There was Jordan standing in front of my desk, rifling through drawers, his face tight with panic. When do we move? I asked. Now, Brooks said. He gave a signal. Officers moved in silent and fast. I stayed outside watching the tablet. The lights in my office suddenly blazed on. Jordan spun around, his eyes wide. Portland Police, hands up. Jordan froze. For a moment it looked like he might run, but there was nowhere to go. 6 officers surrounded him, weapons drawn. On the ground, now, Jordan dropped to his knees. Hands raised. One of the officers pulled his arms behind his back and cuffed him. And then Jordan looked up at the camera. He knew I was watching. His face twisted with rage. You set me up, he screamed. Just you set me up. You're not my father. You're a monster. Brooks's voice came through the radio. We've got him. Caught in the act. Breaking and entering attempted fraud violation of a restraining order. That's on top of the attempted murder charge. I stared at the screen as they hauled Jordan to his feet and led him out of the building. My phone buzzed. Brooks again. Patrick, we need to talk. In person. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of an unmarked police car. Brooks sat beside me, his expression grim. Jordan's asking for a deal, he said. I frowned. A deal. He says he didn't act alone. My chest tightened. What do you mean? He says there's someone else involved. Someone who manipulated him. Who pushed him into this. Brooks looked at me carefully. A woman. And according to Jordan, she's the one who's really behind this. She has access to offshore accounts. She's already moved money, and if we don't find her soon, she's going to disappear with everything. I stared at him. Who is she? Brooks pulled out a photograph and handed it to me. It was a surveillance photo, grainy, taken from a distance. A woman in her late 20s, dark hair, elegant, standing outside a casino. Her name is Simone Parker, Brooks said, and we need to find her before she vanishes with $2.1 million of your money. At 10 o'clock on the morning of day 23. 8 hours after Jordan's arrest, Detective Brooks called me. He's ready to talk, Brooks said, and you're going to want to hear this. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in an observation room at the Portland Police Bureau, staring through one-way glass at my son. Jordan looked broken. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. Brooks sat across from him, a file folder on the table between them. Let's start from the beginning, Brooks said. Jordan stared at his cuffed hands for a long moment. Then he spoke. Her name is Simone Parker. I leaned forward. She's my fiancée. Jordan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Or, I thought she was. Brooks opened the file and pulled out a photograph, the same surveillance photo he'd shown me the night before. The woman with dark hair and calculating eyes. Tell me about her, Brooks said. Jordan exhaled shakily. I met her 2 years ago, at a poker club in Southeast Portland. She was beautiful, smart. She made me feel like I mattered. His voice cracked. At first it was just casual games, low stakes, but Simone knew people. She introduced me to bigger games. higher buy-ins. She said I had talent, that I could win big. Brooks didn't say anything, just listened. But I didn't win, Jordan said bitterly. I lost, again and again, and the debts piled up. By the time I realized how deep I was, I owed $1, $4 million to people who don't accept "I'm sorry" as payment. I felt sick. I was panicking, Jordan continued. I didn't know what to do, and that's when Simone said it. He looked up at Brooks, his eyes wet. She said, "Your father has millions just sitting there. He's 60 years old. He's not going to live forever. Why should you have to wait?" My hands clenched into fists. She made it sound so reasonable, Jordan whispered. Like it wasn't really murder, just accelerating the inevitable. Brooks's voice was cold. "And the brake line?" Jordan nodded slowly. Simone found the mechanic, some guy who worked out of an unlicensed garage in North Portland. She paid him $7,000 to cut the line. Clean, precise, so it would look like an accident. "And what were your instructions?" Brooks asked. Jordan's voice dropped even lower. "Make sure the old man doesn't survive. I'll handle the rest." I closed my eyes. My chest felt tight. "So I took his car," Jordan said. 3 weeks before the crash. Told him the brakes needed servicing. Drove it to the garage. Watched the guy cut the line. Then I brought it back and waited." Brooks leaned forward. "And after the crash, I called 911, Jordan said, "but not right away. I waited. I thought maybe he'd die before they got there. But he didn't. So I took him to the hospital, left him there, and tried to transfer the money while he was unconscious. But the transfer failed," Brooks said. "Yeah." Jordan's laugh was bitter. "It needed his signature. So I waited. I thought if I could just hold on a little longer, if I could convince people he was mentally unstable, I could get guardianship. And then the money would be mine." "But your father showed up at the gala," Brooks said. Jordan nodded, his face twisting. "Everything fell apart. Simone texted me that night. Said she was disappointed. That I'd failed. And then she emptied the offshore account we'd set up together. $2.1 million. Money I'd transferred over the past 6 months from side deals, liquidated assets, everything I had left." My jaw dropped. "She took it all?" Brooks asked. "Every cent." Jordan's voice was hollow. "And then she disappeared." Brooks pulled out another document and slid it across the table. "Simone Parker isn't her real name," he said. Jordan looked up, confused. "Her real name is Sophie Park, or Simone Davis, or half a dozen other aliases. She's a professional con artist. She's pulled this exact scheme at least 3 times before, once in Seattle, twice in San Francisco. She targets wealthy families, seduces the heir, drives them into debt, convinces them to commit crimes for money. Then she takes everything and vanishes." Jordan stared at the document, his face crumbling. "You were a mark," Brooks said flatly. "From the very beginning." Jordan put his face in his hands and sobbed. I stood up and walked out of the observation room. I couldn't watch anymore. Brooks found me in the hallway a few minutes later. "He's cooperating," Brooks said. "Full confession. He'll testify against Simone if we find her." "Will that help him?" I asked quietly. Brooks hesitated. "It'll reduce his sentence. Instead of 30 years, maybe 18 to 20. But he's still going to prison, Patrick." I nodded. That was fair. "What about Simone?" I asked. Brooks pulled out his phone and opened an image, a driver's license photo. Simone Parker, age 29. Dark hair, high cheekbones, and eyes that looked right through the camera with cold, calculated intelligence. TSA flagged her passport this morning, Brooks said. She booked a first-class ticket to Mexico City, departing from Portland International at 7 p.m. tonight. I checked my watch. It was 10:30 a.m. That gives us 9 hours, I said. Brooks nodded. Should 9 hours to catch a woman who's made a career out of disappearing. He looked at me, his expression grim. We're assembling a team now. FBI, TSA, airport security. We'll have agents at every checkpoint. If she shows up, we'll get her. And if she doesn't, I asked. Then she's gone, Brooks said. And so is your $2.1 million. I stared at the photo on his phone, at the woman who'd manipulated my son, who'd convinced him to try to kill me, who'd stolen a fortune and was about to walk away clean. Let's make sure that doesn't happen, I said. The 9-hour countdown began at 10:30 a.m., and we had one destination, Portland International Airport. Detective Brooks made the calls. Within an hour, we had a task force assembled, Portland PD, TSA, and the FBI. The FBI agent in charge was Marcus Rivera, a sharp-eyed man in his early 40s who specialized in interstate fraud cases. He met us in Brooks's office and laid out the plan. Simone Parker, or Sophie Park, or whatever name she's using today, has already checked in online, Rivera said, pulling up her flight details on his laptop. First-class seat, gate C7, departure at 7 p.m. Mexico doesn't have an extradition treaty for financial crimes under $5 million, so if she gets on that plane, she's gone. Then we make sure she doesn't get on that plane, Brooks said. By 2:00 p.m., we were at the airport. Rivera had coordinated with TSA to set up a command center in a back office near security. Monitors lined the walls showing live feeds from dozens of cameras throughout the terminal. We've flagged her passport, Rivera said. The moment she tries to go through security, we'll know. I stood behind him, watching the screens. My heart was pounding. At 4:15 p.m., one of the TSA agents spoke up. We've got her. Security checkpoint concourse C. Rivera pointed at the monitor. There. And there she was. Simone Parker walked through the security scanner with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. She wore a tailored cream blazer, designer jeans, and oversized sunglasses. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked like any other wealthy traveler heading to a vacation destination. She collected her carry-on bag from the conveyor belt, slipped her shoes back on, and walked toward the concourse. She's through security, Rivera said into his radio. All units move into position. Do not engage until she reaches the gate. I repeat, do not engage. We watched on the monitors as she strolled through the terminal. She stopped at a bookstore, bought a magazine, checked her phone. Then she walked into a bar near gate C7 and sat down. Is she serious? Brooks muttered. Simone ordered a glass of white wine. She sipped it slowly, scrolling through her phone, completely at ease. She thought she'd won. At 6:30 p.m., 30 minutes before boarding, Simone finished her wine, left a generous tip, and walked toward gate C7. All units stand by, Rivera said. I watched the monitor as she approached the gate. The boarding area was crowded with passengers waiting to board the Mexico City flight. Simone stood near the window, looking out at the tarmac, her carry-on bag at her feet. Wait for it, Rivera murmured. The gate agent's voice came over the loudspeaker. We will now begin boarding Flight 739 to Mexico City. First-class passengers, please proceed to the gate. Simone picked up her bag and walked toward the boarding line. Now, Rivera said. 4 FBI agents in plainclothes moved in from different directions, closing in on her. Simone must have sensed something, because she paused. Her head turned slightly, scanning the crowd. And then she saw them. For a split second, her mask slipped. Her eyes widened, her body tensed. Then she bolted. She dropped her carry-on bag and ran toward the restrooms, shoving past passengers. "She's running," Rivera barked into his radio. "Cut her off." 2 agents were already there, blocking the restroom entrance. Simone skidded to a halt. She spun around looking for another exit, but the other 2 agents were right behind her. "Simone Parker, FBI hands where I can see them." She froze. For a moment I thought she might try to run again, but then her shoulders sagged. Slowly she raised her hands. One of the agents stepped forward and cuffed her. The terminal erupted in murmurs. Passengers pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Rivera gestured to me. "Come on." We walked down to the gate. By the time we arrived, Simone was standing between 2 agents, her wrists cuffed behind her back. She saw me coming, and she smiled. It was cold, calculating, not a trace of fear or shame. "You must be Patrick," she said, her voice smooth and unbothered. "Jordan talked about you a lot." I stopped a few feet away from her, my hands clenched at my sides. "You almost killed me," I said quietly. "For money." Simone tilted her head as if considering the accusation. Then she shrugged. "It wasn't personal," she said. "Just business." I stared at her. Business. "You manipulated my son. You drove him into debt. You convinced him to murder me. And you stole millions." "I didn't steal anything," Simone said calmly. "Jordan gave me that money, willingly, desperately, because he thought it would save him. You lied to him." "I told him what he wanted to hear," she corrected. "There's a difference." Rivera stepped forward. "Simone Parker, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and interstate racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." "I know my rights," Simone said, cutting him off. She looked back at me, her smile widening slightly. "You think this is over? You think catching me changes anything?" "You're going to prison," I said. "For a few years, maybe," she said. "And then I'll get out. And I'll do it again. Because there's always another Jordan. Another desperate, weak man who thinks he deserves more than he's earned. And I'll be there to take advantage of him." Her voice was so matter-of-fact, so devoid of remorse. "You're a monster," I said. Simone laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "No, I'm a businesswoman. Monsters kill for pleasure. I do it for profit." Rivera nodded to the agents. "Get her out of here." They led her away through the crowded terminal, her hands cuffed behind her back. Passengers stared. Some whispered. Some took photos. And Simone walked through it all with her head held high, as if she were walking a red carpet instead of being arrested. Just before they reached the exit, she looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were cold, empty, and utterly unafraid. And in that moment, I realized something. To women like Simone Parker, getting caught wasn't a failure. It was just a temporary setback in an endless game of deception. She'd done this before, in Seattle, in San Francisco, and probably a dozen other cities I didn't know about. And if she ever got out, she'd do it again. Because for people like her, there was no guilt, no conscience, just calculation. Brooks came up beside me as we watched the agents take her away. "We got her," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, we did. But as I stood there in the middle of the crowded terminal watching Simone disappear through the exit doors, I didn't feel relief. I felt something else. A deep, unsettling realization that the world was full of people like her. People who saw other human beings not as individuals, but as opportunities, as targets. And no matter how many we caught, there would always be more. Simone's caught. Jordan's locked up. Justice served right. But Patrick realizes something unsettling: there will always be more predators like her. If you're still watching, drop "caught" in the comments. Reminder: this story is fictional enhanced for storytelling. Prefer to stop close now. Ready for the trial? Stay tuned. 6 months after Simone Parker's arrest, the trial began. 6 months. It should have been enough time to heal, to process, to move on. But it wasn't. I still woke up in the middle of the night, my chest tight, my hands shaking, reliving the moment my car went off Cornell Road. I still flinched every time I got behind the wheel. I still saw Jordan's face in my nightmares, standing at the edge of that ravine, watching me bleed. Post-traumatic stress disorder, the therapist called it. I just called it exhaustion. Barbara had been patient with me. She'd let me stay at her house for 3 months while I figured out where to go next. Richard handled the legal paperwork, selling the Eastmoreland house, liquidating assets, setting up a new living arrangement in Lake Oswego. Detective Brooks checked in every few weeks to update me on the case. And through it all, I waited. Waited for the trial. Waited to face my son and the woman who'd tried to destroy us both. Jordan had taken a deal. In exchange for testifying against Simone, the district attorney agreed to reduce his charges. Instead of life in prison for attempted murder, Jordan would serve 18 to 20 years with the possibility of parole. It still felt like mercy he didn't deserve, but the DA needed his testimony. Simone Parker had refused every plea deal. She was going to trial. And without Jordan's cooperation, the case against her would be harder to prove, so Jordan would testify. And I would have to sit in that courtroom and listen to him explain how he'd tried to kill me. The trial was held at the Multnomah County Courthouse, a grand building downtown with tall marble columns and a sense of gravitas that made everything feel final. I sat in the gallery with Barbara on one side and Richard on the other. Detective Brooks sat a few rows back along with FBI agent Marcus Rivera, who'd flown in from Seattle to testify about Simone's prior cons. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, onlookers. A few of Jordan's old friends, though I didn't recognize most of them. And at the front of the room, sitting at the defense table in a pressed navy suit, was Simone Parker. She looked perfect. Her hair was styled. Her makeup was subtle. She sat with her hands folded calmly in her lap, her expression serene as if she were attending a business meeting instead of a murder trial. Her attorney, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s, leaned over and whispered something to her. She nodded, once her face betraying nothing. I hated how composed she was. The prosecutor, a woman named Julia Martinez, stood and called the first witness. The state calls Jordan Sullivan. A door at the side of the courtroom opened, and my son walked in. I barely recognized him. Jordan wore an orange jumpsuit, standard issue for inmates. His wrists were cuffed in front of him. His hair, once carefully styled, was overgrown and messy. His face was gaunt, hollow-cheeked, his eyes ringed with dark circles. He'd lost at least 20 pounds. He looked broken. A bailiff led him to the witness stand, removed the cuffs, and stepped back. Jordan sat down slowly, his hands gripping the armrests. He didn't look at me. Julia Martinez approached the stand. "To Mr. Sullivan, please state your name for the record." "Jordan Michael Sullivan," he said quietly. "Mr. Sullivan, you are currently incarcerated at the Columbia River Correctional Institution, is that correct?" "Yes." And you have entered a plea agreement with the district attorney's office in exchange for your testimony today. Yes. Martinez nodded. Can you tell the court how you met the defendant, Simone Parker? Jordan's eyes flicked to Simone for the first time. She stared back at him, her expression blank. He swallowed hard. I met her 2 years ago, at a poker club in Southeast Portland. And what was your relationship with Ms. Parker? We were engaged, or I thought we were. Can you describe how Ms. Parker influenced your actions leading up to the incident on November 14th? Jordan's hands tightened on the armrests. He took a shaky breath. She introduced me to gambling, he said, to high-stakes games. She said I was good at it, that I could win big. But I didn't win. I lost, over and over, and the debts piled up. How much debt? Martinez asked. $1.4 million. A murmur ran through the courtroom. And did Ms. Parker offer you a solution to this debt? Jordan nodded slowly. She said my father had millions just sitting in a trust fund, that he was old, that he wouldn't live much longer. She said, "Why should you wait?" My chest tightened. And what did Ms. Parker suggest you do? Martinez asked. Jordan's voice cracked. She said we needed to accelerate things. She found a mechanic, someone who worked off the books. She paid him to cut the brake line on my father's car. And what were your instructions? Jordan closed his eyes. Make sure he doesn't survive. The courtroom was silent. Martinez let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then she asked, "Did you follow those instructions?" "Yes." "And did your father survive?" "Yes." Jordan's voice was barely a whisper. "He did." Martinez nodded. "After the crash, what did Miss Parker do?" "She told me to keep trying, to get guardianship, to get the money. But when that didn't work, when my father showed up at the gala and exposed me, she took everything." "What do you mean, everything?" "She emptied our offshore account. $2.1 million. Money I'd scraped together from every asset I had left. And then she disappeared." Jordan's hands were shaking now. "And where is Ms. Parker now?" Martinez asked. Jordan looked at her. At Simone, sitting calmly at the defense table, her face expressionless. "She's right there," Jordan said, his voice breaking. "And she doesn't care. She never cared." Martinez stepped back. No further questions. The defense attorney stood to cross-examine, but I barely heard it. I was staring at Jordan, at the man my son had become. And then, as the defense attorney finished, and Jordan was dismissed, he did something I didn't expect. He looked at me. His eyes were red. Tears streamed down his face. "Dad," he said, his voice choked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The bailiff moved to escort him out, but Jordan kept looking at me, his face twisted in anguish. "I'm sorry," he said again, and then he was gone. The courtroom was silent. I sat frozen, staring at the empty witness stand. Barbara's hand found mine and squeezed gently. The judge called a recess. I stood on shaky legs and walked out into the hallway. My head was spinning. My chest felt tight. I leaned against the marble wall, trying to breathe. Richard appeared beside me. "Patrick, are you okay?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't okay. I'd spent 6 months preparing for this trial. 6 months convincing myself that I could face Jordan, that I could listen to him confess, that I could watch him be held accountable. But seeing him up there gaunt, broken, crying, it wasn't what I'd expected. He'd tried to kill me, but he was still my son. And tomorrow I would have to stand in that same witness box and tell the court in detail how the man I'd raised had tried to erase me from existence. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then I looked directly at Simone Parker. She stared back, her face expressionless, as if this were all just a minor inconvenience. Prosecutor Julia Martinez approached the witness stand. "Mr. Sullivan, can you tell the court what happened on the night of November 14th? I took a breath. I was driving home on Cornell Road. It was raining. I approached a sharp curve and pressed the brake pedal. I paused. Nothing happened. What do you mean nothing happened? The brakes didn't work, I said. I pressed harder. Still nothing. The car slid off the road and went over the embankment. And then I lost consciousness. When I came to, I saw headlights above me. Someone had stopped. It was my son, Jordan." Martinez nodded. "What did Jordan do?" "He stood there," I said quietly, "at the edge of the ravine, just watching me for a long time. Then he made a phone call, and then he left." Murmurs ran through the courtroom. "And after the crash, Mr. Sullivan, what happened next?" "I woke up in the hospital. A nurse told me that Jordan had brought me in but hadn't stayed. Later, I discovered that while I was unconscious, someone had attempted to transfer $6.8 million from my trust fund." "Who made that transfer request?" "Jordan." "And where was that money supposed to go?" I looked at Simone. "To an offshore account, one that Jordan shared with Simone Parker." Martinez walked over to the evidence table and picked up a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit 17 bank records showing multiple transfers totaling $1 million from Jordan Sullivan's accounts into an account registered under the name Simone Parker, also known as Sophie Park." The judge nodded. "So entered." Martinez handed me the document. "Mr. Sullivan, can you identify this?" I scanned the pages. Dates, amounts, account numbers. "Yes," I said. "These are transfers Jordan made over the course of 6 months. All of them went to Simone." "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan." Martinez stepped back. "Your witness." Simone's defense attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit, stood and approached the stand. "Mr. Sullivan, isn't it true that your son acted alone? That Ms. Parker had no knowledge of his plans?" "No," I said firmly. "That's not true." "How can you be sure?" "Because Jordan told me. He told the police. He told this court. Simone Parker orchestrated everything. She introduced him to gambling. She drove him into debt. She found the mechanic who cut my brake line, and when the plan failed, she took the money and ran." The defense attorney frowned. "But you have no direct evidence linking Ms. Parker to the sabotage of your vehicle, do you?" "I have Jordan's testimony. I have the financial records. And I have this." I pulled out my phone and opened a saved email, one I'd received from Detective Brooks 2 weeks before the trial. This is a text message recovered from Jordan's phone, sent by Simone Parker the night before the crash. Martinez stood. "Objection, Your Honor. This evidence wasn't disclosed." "It was disclosed," the defense attorney snapped. 3 days ago." The judge waved them both down. "Overruled. Continue." I read the message aloud. "Tomorrow night. Cornell Road. Make sure he doesn't survive. I'll handle the rest." The courtroom went silent. The defense attorney's face went pale. He had no rebuttal. No further questions, he muttered, sitting down. Martinez stood. The state rests your honor. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. In the matter of the state of Oregon versus Simone Parker on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. Simone didn't flinch. On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of extortion, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of interstate racketeering, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The judge turned to Simone. Ms. Parker, you have been found guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be delivered immediately. Simone stood, her hands cuffed in front of her. For your crimes, the judge said, you are sentenced to 28 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. 28 years. Simone's expression didn't change. She simply nodded once, as if accepting a business deal. The bailiff led her away. As she passed my seat in the gallery, she glanced at me one last time and smiled. A week later, Jordan's sentencing took place in the same courtroom. He stood before the judge in his orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, his head bowed. Jordan Sullivan, the judge said, you have pleaded guilty to attempted murder, wire fraud, and conspiracy. In exchange for your cooperation with the state, your sentence has been reduced. You are hereby sentenced to 19 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. 19 years. Jordan's shoulders sagged. He nodded. The judge looked at me. Mr. Sullivan, would you like to make a statement? I hadn't planned to, but I stood. The courtroom was quiet as I walked to the front. I looked at Jordan. He looked back at me, his eyes red and wet. He's my son, I said quietly. And he tried to kill me. Both of those things are true. I paused. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. I don't know if I'm supposed to. But I do know this: what he did doesn't define who I am. It doesn't define who Catherine was. And it doesn't define the life I'm going to build moving forward. I turned to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. I walked back to my seat. As the bailiff led Jordan out of the courtroom, he looked back at me one last time. Dad. He said, his voice breaking. Dad, please. I didn't turn around. I sat down beside Barbara and stared straight ahead until he was gone. When the hearing ended, I walked out of the Multnomah County Courthouse for the last time. The air outside was cold and crisp. The sun was setting over Portland, casting the city in shades of gold and amber. Richard was waiting for me at the bottom of the courthouse steps. He held a manila folder. What's that? I asked. Final paperwork, Richard said. For the Eastmoreland house. I took the folder and opened it. Inside were documents transferring ownership liquidation statements and a check for $3. $2 million, the sale price. I stared at the check. The house where Catherine and I had built our life, where we'd raised Jordan, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary beautiful days. It was gone. Richard put a hand on my shoulder. It's time to decide, Patrick. Sell it and start over, or hold on to the memories. I looked at him, then at the folder, then at the courthouse behind me, the place where my son had been sentenced to 19 years in prison. I closed the folder. Let's start over, I said. 2 months after the trial, 9 months after the crash, a for sale sign went up in front of the Eastmoreland house. It was a grand old Victorian 3 stories with a wraparound porch and a garden that Catherine had tended for 20 years. We'd raised Jordan there, celebrated birthdays there, hosted Thanksgiving dinners and summer barbecues. But I couldn't live there anymore. There were too many ghosts. Richard helped me pack. Barbara came by most days with coffee and sandwiches, making sure I actually ate. Detective Brooks stopped in once to check on me, though I think he just wanted to make sure I was holding up. The hardest part was going through Catherine's things. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her books lined the shelves in the study. Her gardening gloves sat on the bench by the back door, dusty but waiting, as if she might walk in any moment and pull them on. I sat on the floor of our bedroom surrounded by boxes and pulled out a photo album. Catherine and me on our wedding day. Catherine pregnant with Jordan. Jordan as a baby laughing in her arms. Jordan at 5 missing his 2 front teeth. Jordan at 10 holding up a trophy from his soccer team. Jordan at 15 standing between us at his high school graduation. He'd been a good kid once. Sweet, curious, full of life. What had happened? When had he changed? I thought about Simone, about the poker clubs, about the debt, about the lies. But the truth was, I didn't know when it started. Maybe it had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. Maybe I'd just been too blind to see it. I closed the album and set it in a box marked storage. "I'm sorry, Catherine," I said quietly to the empty room. I couldn't protect him. The house sold in 3 weeks. A young couple with 2 kids, a boy and a girl, maybe 7 and 9. They walked through the rooms with wide eyes, talking excitedly about which bedroom would be whose, where they'd put the Christmas tree, how they'd plant tomatoes in the garden. The wife stopped in the kitchen and ran her hand along the countertop. "This is perfect," she said, smiling at her husband. "This is home." I stood in the doorway watching them, and for the first time in months I felt something close to peace. The house would live again. It would be filled with laughter and noise and life. It wouldn't be a tomb anymore. The closing happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I signed the papers in Richard's office. The buyers signed theirs. The real estate agent handed me a check for $3.2 million. I stared at it. $3.2 million. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having when Catherine and I first bought the house 40 years ago. Back then, we'd scraped together a down payment, taken out a mortgage, and worked ourselves to the bone to make it ours. And now it was gone. But so was everything else. The following Saturday, Richard drove me to my new place. It was a small house in Lake Oswego, a quiet suburb just south of Portland. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a modest yard, a view of the lake from the back deck. It was a fraction of the size of the Eastmoreland house, but it was mine. And it didn't carry the weight of the past. Richard helped me unload boxes from his truck. Barbara had already stocked the fridge and made up the bed in the master bedroom. Brooks had sent over a case of beer with a note. Congrats on the fresh start. By evening, I was sitting on the back deck with a beer in hand, watching the sun set over the lake. Richard joined me. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I thought about it. "Lighter," I said finally, "and heavier all at once." Richard nodded. He didn't need me to explain. We sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. "What are you going to do with the money?" Richard asked eventually. I'd been thinking about that a lot. The $3.2 million from the house, the remaining balance in the trust fund, the investments Catherine and I had built over 40 years. All of it was mine now, but it didn't feel like mine. It felt like ours. Catherine's and mine, the life we'd built together, the future we'd imagined for Jordan. Except Jordan wasn't going to inherit it. Jordan was sitting in a cell at the Oregon State Penitentiary, serving 19 years for trying to kill me. And Catherine was gone. So what was I supposed to do with it? "I don't know yet," I said quietly. Richard took a sip of his beer. "You've got time to figure it out." The next morning, I woke up early and drove back to Eastmoreland one last time. I parked across the street from the house and sat there, engine idling, staring at the place I'd called home for so long. The for sale sign was gone. The new family's cars were in the driveway. I could see movement through the kitchen window, someone making breakfast. Life was already moving on. I thought about Catherine, about the life we'd had here, about the dreams we'd dreamed, and I thought about Jordan, about the boy he'd been, about the man he'd become. I tried, I said aloud to no one. I really tried. Then I put the car in drive and left. Richard picked me up an hour later. "Ready?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." As we drove away from the neighborhood, away from the tree-lined streets and the Victorian houses and the memories, I felt something shift inside me. The past was gone. The house was gone. Catherine was gone. Jordan was gone. But I was still here. And I had a choice to make. I could let the grief and the betrayal consume me. Or I could build something new. Something that honored Catherine's memory, something that meant more than money in a bank account. I looked at Richard. "Selling the house was the easy part," I said quietly. "What's the hard part?" Richard asked. I stared out the window at the passing landscape. "Figuring out what to do with the money Catherine and I spent 40 years building," I said. "Now that the son we built it for is going to be behind bars for the next decade." Richard didn't have an answer. Neither did I. Not yet. But I knew I'd figure it out, because that's what Catherine would have wanted. 1 year after the crash, I moved into the house in Lake Oswego. It was small, modern, peaceful. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, and a back deck that overlooked the lake. The walls were painted a soft gray. The floors were hardwood, clean and new. There were no ghosts here. No memories of Catherine cooking Sunday dinners. No echoes of Jordan's laughter as a child. Just silence and space and the possibility of something new. I unpacked slowly over the first few weeks. Barbara helped me arrange furniture. Richard installed shelves in the study. Detective Brooks stopped by with a housewarming gift, a bottle of scotch, and a note that said, "For the hard days." There would be hard days. I knew that. But there would also be good ones. I built a routine. Every morning I woke at 6 and walked around the lake. 3 miles. Sometimes I'd see other walkers, retirees, dog owners, people who nodded politely, but didn't ask questions. I liked the anonymity. I liked being just another man taking a morning walk. After the walk, I'd make coffee and sit on the deck. I'd watch the light change over the water and listen to the birds. Then I'd work. Henry Blackwell had offered me a consulting position with his real estate firm, part-time, flexible hours, no pressure. I'd hesitated at first, but Henry had insisted. "You need something to do, Patrick," he'd said. "Something that isn't grief." He was right. So I worked. 3 days a week. Project management, contract reviews, nothing too demanding. Just enough to keep my mind sharp and my days structured. In the afternoons, I gardened. I planted tomatoes, basil, and lettuce in raised beds on the side of the house. I wasn't as good at it as Catherine had been, but I tried. And there was something meditative about digging in the soil, pulling weeds, watching things grow. On Thursdays, I went to therapy. Doctor Emily Grant was a trauma specialist in her 50s, calm, patient, no nonsense. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. "How are you sleeping?" she'd ask. "Better," I'd say. And it was true. The nightmares were less frequent now. I could drive without flinching. I could think about Cornell Road without my chest tightening. "And how are you feeling about Jordan?" That question was harder. "I don't know," I'd say. "Some days I'm angry, Some days I'm sad. Some days I don't feel anything at all. That's normal, doctor, Grant would say. Grief isn't linear, and neither is trauma. I nodded. I understood that intellectually, but understanding it and living it were two different things. At home, I kept the space simple. There were no family photos on the walls, no reminders of the life I'd had before, except for one. On the mantel above the fireplace, I kept a single framed photograph. Catherine and me on our wedding day. We were young, hopeful, smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. I looked at that photo every day, and I talked to her sometimes when the house was quiet. I'm trying, I'd say. I'm really trying. I didn't keep any photos of Jordan. I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. On a Thursday evening in late November, 10 months after the trial, 1 year and 2 weeks after the crash, I was sitting on the couch reading a book when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Telemarketers, probably. Or a wrong number. But something made me pick it up. Hello. There was a pause. Then a robotic voice. You have a prepaid call from... A brief silence, then a human voice. Familiar. Strained. Jordan Sullivan. My breath caught. The automated voice continued. To an inmate at Multnomah County Jail. This call will be recorded and monitored. To accept this call and agree to the charges, press 1. To decline, press 2. I stared at the phone. Jordan, calling me. For the first time in 10 months. My finger hovered over the screen. Press 1. Press 2. I could hear my own heartbeat. I hadn't spoken to Jordan since the trial, since he'd stood in that courtroom and said, "Dad, please," and I'd walked away without looking back. I'd told myself it was over, that I'd closed that chapter, that I didn't owe him anything. But now, hearing his name through the automated recording, I felt something crack open inside me. What did he want? To apologize again, to ask for money, to manipulate me one more time? Or was he just lonely? I thought about the last time I'd seen him. Orange jumpsuit, hollow eyes, cuffed hands. He'd looked broken, but he'd also tried to kill me. Both of those things were true. Dr. Grant's voice echoed in my head. You don't owe him forgiveness, but you do owe yourself closure. Was this closure, or was it just reopening a wound? I looked at the mantel, at the photo of Catherine and me. What would she want me to do? I didn't know. The automated voice repeated, to accept this call and agree to the charges, press 1. To decline, press 2. My thumb hovered over the screen. Press 1. Press 2. 10 months ago, I'd walked out of that courtroom and decided to move forward, to build a new life, to let go of the past. But could I really let go if I never heard what he had to say? Could I really move forward if I hung up now? I thought about the therapy sessions, about the walks around the lake, about the garden I'd planted, about the work I'd done to rebuild myself. Was I strong enough to hear his voice again? Or would it shatter everything I'd worked so hard to build? The automated voice spoke again, more insistent this time. Shukini, if you do not respond, this call will be terminated. My heart pounded. I stared at the screen. Jordan Sullivan, my son, the man who'd tried to erase me, the boy I'd raised. Both, always both. I took a breath, and my finger still hovered. Press 1, press 2, answer, or hang up, forgive, or end it. I didn't know. I pressed 2, declined. The automated voice said, "This call has been terminated," and the line went dead. I set the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it for a long time. Jordan had called, and I'd hung up. It felt like the right decision, but it also felt like something had broken all over again. 2 days later, the letter arrived. It came in a standard white envelope with a return address stamped in the corner, Multnomah County Jail, Portland, Oregon. Inmate number 47,392, Jordan Sullivan. I stood at the mailbox holding it, my hands shaking. I didn't open it. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and walked away. For 7 days, I carried that letter with me everywhere. In my pocket during morning walks around the lake, on my desk while I worked, in my bag when I went to therapy. Dr. Grant noticed. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the envelope peeking out of my jacket pocket. "A letter," I said. "From Jordan." She didn't say anything, just waited. "I don't know if I want to read it," I admitted. "Why not?" I thought about it. "Because if I read it, I'll have to decide what to do with it, and I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Doctor," Grant leaned back in her chair. "You don't have to read it, Patrick. You don't owe him that." "I know. But you're carrying it with you." "I know." She smiled gently. "So maybe part of you does want to read it. Or maybe part of you just wants to decide what to do with it on your own terms." I nodded slowly. On the 5th night, a storm rolled in over Lake Oswego. Rain hammered against the windows. Wind rattled the trees. The temperature dropped, and I lit a fire in the fireplace for the first time since moving in. I sat on the couch, a glass of scotch in one hand, and stared at the envelope on the coffee table. Inmate number 47,392, Jordan Sullivan, my son. The man who'd tried to kill me. Both. Always both. I picked up the envelope. The paper was thin, institutional. I could feel the weight of the pages inside, maybe 2, maybe 3. I turned it over in my hands. What did he want to say? Was it an apology? A justification? A plea for money? Or was it just words I thought about the trial? About Jordan standing in that courtroom crying, saying, "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I'd walked away, and I'd told myself it was over. But if it was over, why was I still holding this letter? I took a breath, and I opened it. The handwriting was Jordan's. I recognized it immediately, the slanted cursive, the way he looped his Y's and G's. It was the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and school assignments and notes left on the kitchen counter. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve to ask. But I need you to know." I stopped. I stared at the words. "I need you to know." And suddenly I realized I didn't need to know. I didn't need to know why he did it. I didn't need to know if he was sorry. I didn't need to know if Simone had manipulated him, or if he'd been desperate, or if he'd ever really loved me at all. I didn't need any of it, because knowing wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't undo the crash on Cornell Road. It wouldn't bring Catherine back. It wouldn't give me back the years I'd spent raising a son who tried to kill me. All it would do was pull me back into his orbit, back into the grief and the anger and the endless, exhausting question of why. And I was tired of asking why. I looked at the fireplace, at the flames dancing over the logs. I thought about Catherine. What would she want me to do? For a long time that question had haunted me. What would Catherine say? What would Catherine think? How would Catherine handle this? But sitting there holding that letter, I realized something. Catherine wasn't here, and I couldn't keep asking her for permission to move forward. I had to decide for myself. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and held the letter over the flames. For a moment I hesitated. This was it. The last thread connecting me to Jordan. If I burned this letter, I'd never know what he wanted to say. I'd never know if it was an apology or an explanation or just another manipulation. But maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't need closure from him. Maybe I just needed to close the door myself. I let go. The letter fell into the fire. The edges curled and blackened immediately. The ink bled and smeared. Jordan's handwriting. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me," dissolved into ash. I watched it burn. The flames consumed the paper page by page, word by word, until there was nothing left but smoke and ash. And as the last corner of the letter crumbled and floated up the chimney, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not happiness. Not joy. Just peace. I sat back down on the couch and finished my scotch. The fire crackled. The rain pounded against the windows. And I sat there in the warm glow of the flames, feeling lighter than I had in months. I didn't need to forgive Jordan. I didn't need to understand him. I didn't need to carry his guilt or his pain or his regret. I just needed to let go. And I had. The next morning, I woke up early and took my usual walk around the lake. The storm had passed. The air was crisp and clean. The water was calm. I walked the full 3 miles without thinking about Jordan once. When I got home, I made coffee, sat on the back deck, and watched the sunrise. And I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed anyone. Not Jordan, not society, not even myself. For so long, I'd thought that healing meant forgiving. That moving forward required me to let go of my anger, to find peace with what had happened, to somehow reconcile the man my son had become with the boy I'd raised. But that wasn't true. Healing didn't mean forgiveness. Healing meant choosing to move forward. It meant waking up every morning and deciding that today I would build something new. Today I would take a walk. Today I would work in the garden. Today I would live. Not for Jordan, not for Catherine, for myself. I finished my coffee and went inside. On the mantel, the wedding photo of Catherine and me still sat in its frame. I looked at it for a long moment. "I'm okay," I said quietly. "I think I'm finally okay." And for the first time since the crash, I believed it. The morning after I burned Jordan's letter, I drove to Lincoln Memorial Park. I brought white lilies, Catherine's favorite. It was the first time I'd visited her grave since before the crash. For over a year, I'd avoided it. Not because I didn't want to see her, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd let our son try to kill me. Ashamed that I hadn't seen it coming. Ashamed that I'd survived when she hadn't. But that morning, a clear, beautiful summer morning, exactly 1 year after the crash, that had changed everything, I finally went. The cemetery was quiet. The paths were lined with old oak trees, their branches casting dappled shadows on the ground. Birds sang softly. The grass was green and well kept. I walked slowly carrying the lilies until I reached her grave. The headstone was simple, gray granite, understated, just the way she would have wanted. Catherine Sullivan, beloved wife and mother, 1964 to 2023. I knelt down and placed the lilies at the base of the stone. "Hi, Catherine," I said quietly. "Sorry it took me so long." I sat down on the grass beside her grave, my legs crossed, and for a long moment I just sat there in silence. Then I started talking. "I don't know where to start," I said. "So much has happened. And I've been avoiding you, because I didn't know how to tell you." I took a breath. "Jordan cut the brake line on my car," I said. "He stood at the side of Cornell Road and watched me crash. He tried to kill me, Catherine. Our son tried to kill me." My voice cracked. "And I keep asking myself, what did we do wrong? Where did we fail? How did we raise a boy who could do something like that. The wind rustled through the trees. But you'd tell me we didn't fail, I continued. You'd tell me it was his choice, that people make their own decisions, that we loved him the best we could. I nodded as if she were sitting there beside me. There was a woman, I said. Simone Parker. We never met her, but she manipulated him, drove him into debt, convinced him that killing me was the only way out. She was the one pulling the strings. I paused. There was a trial. Jordan got 19 years. Simone got 28. Justice was served, or as close to it as we're going to get. I pulled at the grass beside me. Jordan wrote me a letter, I said. From prison, I burned it, without reading it. I hope you understand. Silence. I couldn't do it, Catherine. I couldn't let him back in. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I looked at the headstone. I can't forgive him, I said quietly. Maybe someday I will, but not today, and I'm okay with that. The sun was warm on my back. I sold the house, I said. Eastmoreland. I couldn't stay there. Too many ghosts. Too many memories. I smiled faintly. I got a place in Lake Oswego, small, quiet, right on the lake. It's peaceful. You'd like it. There's a garden. I planted tomatoes. They're not as good as yours, but I'm trying. I took another breath. I've been going to therapy. Dr. Grant. She's good. She's helping me work through everything. And I'm working again. With Henry. Just part-time, but it's good to have something to do. I looked up at the sky. I'm okay, Catherine, I said. I really am. It took a long time, and there are still hard days, but I'm okay. And then I told her the most important part. I'm using part of the trust fund, I said. The money Jordan tried to steal. I'm setting up a scholarship in your name. I smiled. The Catherine Sullivan Memorial Scholarship. A $1.5 million endowment for students who need it. Kids from difficult backgrounds. Second chances. The kind of thing you always believed in. My voice grew stronger. Jordan had his chance, I said, and he wasted it. But there are other kids out there, kids who deserve a shot. Kids who'll use it to build something good, to make something of their lives. I looked at the headstone. It's what you would have wanted, I said. I know it is. The wind picked up, rustling the lilies. I'm going to live, Catherine, I said. Really live. Not just exist, not just survive. I'm going to wake up every morning and choose to build something, to be something. For you, for me, for the life we had together. I stood up slowly, brushing the grass off my jeans. I love you, I said. I always will. And I'm sorry I couldn't protect our son. I'm sorry I couldn't save him from himself. I touched the headstone gently. But I'm not going to let his choices define me anymore. I took one last look at the grave, at the simple stone, at the white lilies, at the woman I'd loved for 40 years. And then I walked back to my car. As I drove away from Lincoln Memorial Park, leaving Catherine to rest in peace while I returned to a life rebuilt from ashes, I carried with me one simple truth. Betrayal from the people we love doesn't define who we are. And sometimes the strongest thing we can do is choose to move forward. Patrick Sullivan's story doesn't end with revenge. It doesn't end with forgiveness either. It ends with something more powerful than both. It ends with choice. The choice to move forward. The choice to rebuild. The choice to live. And that's the lesson we all need to hear. Money reveals who we really are. Patrick's story is a reminder that money has a way of exposing the darkest parts of human nature. When greed takes hold, especially when manipulated by a predator like Simone Parker, even the strongest family bonds can shatter. Jordan wasn't born a murderer. He was raised by loving parents. He had opportunities. He had a future. But when debt piled up, when desperation set in, and when Simone whispered in his ear that his father's life was worth less than $6, 8 million, Jordan made a choice. He chose money over family. He chose greed over love. And he paid the price. 19 years in prison. His father alive but gone from his life. His mother's memory tarnished by his actions. That's the cost of letting money define your morality. Justice isn't the same as revenge. One of the most powerful moments in Patrick's story is when he burned Jordan's letter without reading it. Some people might call that cruel, cold, unforgiving, but it wasn't. It was self-protection. Society often pressures victims to forgive, to be the bigger person, to extend grace to those who've hurt them. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone your pain, not your family, not your friends, not even yourself. Forgiveness is not a requirement for healing. Patrick didn't need to know what Jordan had to say. He didn't need an apology. He didn't need an explanation. He needed to close the door. And he did. That's not revenge. That's boundary setting. That's survival. Justice was served in the courtroom. Simone got 28 years. Jordan got 19. The law held them accountable. Patrick didn't need to carry their guilt. He just needed to let go. Family isn't always blood. One of the most painful parts of Patrick's story is the betrayal itself. Jordan wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a random criminal. He was Patrick's son. The boy Patrick raised. The child he loved. The future he'd invested in. And that boy tried to kill him. But here's what Patrick learned. Family isn't always the people who share your blood. When Jordan stood at the edge of that ravine and waited before calling 911, he stopped being family. When he tried to steal $6.8 million while Patrick lay unconscious in a hospital bed, he stopped being family. Family is the people who show up when everyone else walks away. For Patrick, that was Barbara Wells, the neighbor who opened her home without hesitation. That was Richard Wade, the lawyer who worked tirelessly to build the case. That was Detective Brooks, the cop who believed him when no one else did. That was Henry Blackwell, the business partner, who stood up at the gala and vouched for his sanity. That is family. And there's no shame in cutting ties with people who see you as nothing more than a resource to exploit, even if they're blood relatives. Turning pain into purpose. The Catherine Sullivan Memorial Scholarship is perhaps the most mature response to betrayal that any of us could hope for. Patrick took the money Jordan tried to steal, the $1.5 million from the trust fund, and turned it into something meaningful. Something that would help others. Something that honored his wife's memory. He didn't hoard it. He didn't spend it on revenge. He didn't let it sit in a bank account, a reminder of everything he'd lost. He turned his pain into purpose. And that's the ultimate form of healing. When someone tries to destroy you, the best revenge isn't destruction in return. It's creation. Build something. Help someone. Leave the world better than you found it. That's what Patrick did. And that's what we all can do. You can start over at any age. Patrick Sullivan is 61 years old. He lost his wife. His son tried to kill him. His home was filled with ghosts. He could have given up. He could have let bitterness consume him. He could have spent the rest of his life replaying the crash on Cornell Road, asking why. But he didn't. He sold the house. He moved to Lake Oswego. He built a new routine. He went to therapy. He planted a garden. He worked with Henry. He walked around the lake every morning. He chose to live. Not just survive. Live. And if Patrick can do that at 61 after the worst betrayal imaginable, then any of us can. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to build a life worth living. A question for you. So here's what I want to ask you, the person watching this story unfold. If you were Patrick, if your own child had tried to kill you and then sent you a letter from prison, would you read it or would you burn it just like he did? Think about it. Really think about it. Because the answer says a lot about who you are, about what you believe healing looks like, about whether you think forgiveness is something we owe or something we choose. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for following Patrick's journey, from victim to survivor to someone who chose to live again. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel or see your own life a little differently, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with betrayal or family drama or the question of whether they're allowed to walk away. And subscribe to this channel for more true stories about family betrayal, resilience, and the messy, complicated business of being human. The final image, picture this. Patrick Sullivan, 61 years old, walking away from Lincoln Memorial Park on a bright summer morning. The sun is warm on his back. White lilies rest on Catherine's grave. His car is parked at the edge of the cemetery. He's walking toward Lake Oswego, toward a small house with a garden, toward a life rebuilt from ashes. He's not running. He's not hiding. He's just moving forward, one step at a time. And that is the strongest thing any of us can do. Looking back at my own story, I see clearly how blind trust and willful silence nearly destroyed everything I'd built over 60 years. Don't be like me, I ignored every warning sign. Jordan's sudden insistence on fixing my brakes 3 weeks before the crash. His mounting gambling debts, those strange late-night phone calls behind closed doors, the cold distance in his eyes. I told myself every son deserves a second chance, that unconditional love conquers all. But I was wrong. I confused genuine love with dangerous enabling, and that confusion nearly cost me my life. Family betrayal doesn't announce itself with sirens. It creeps in quietly, disguised as concern, until one rainy November night, your brake pedal goes to the floor on Cornell Road, and your own son stands at the edge of a ravine watching you bleed, calculating whether you'll survive long enough to sign over $6.8 million. The hardest lesson I learned is this: family betrayal is devastatingly real, and money, especially large inheritances, can transform even blood relations into cold strangers. When someone begins to see you as an obstacle, rather than a father, as a resource, rather than a person, you owe them nothing. Not forgiveness, not money, not time, not even an explanation. Justice is not revenge. Burning that jail letter without reading it was self-preservation, not cruelty. God gave us wisdom to discern real danger, and sometimes protecting yourself means walking away permanently from those who share your name. If you're living through your own family betrayal right now, whether theft, manipulation, elder abuse, or worse, hear me clearly. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you are not required to forgive to heal. Chosen family friends like Barbara Wells, allies like Detective Brooks and lawyer Richard Wade, partners like Henry Blackwell can be stronger than blood. Turn your pain into purpose. I channeled mine into the Catherine Sullivan Memorial Scholarship, a $1.5 million endowment, so other young people might find hope where I found ashes. Grandpa stories like mine may sound extreme, but they happen every day behind closed doors. Grandpa stories teach us survival isn't about forgiving the unforgivable. It's about refusing to let betrayal define your future. And Grandpa stories remind us it's never too late, even at 61, to start over and rebuild. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the very end. Please comment your thoughts if you were in Patrick's position, discovering your son's murder plot. What would you do? Would you read the jail letter or burn it? I genuinely want to hear your perspective. If this story touched you, please subscribe so you won't miss future episodes exploring trust, betrayal, and redemption. A gentle note. Although inspired by real-life patterns of financial elder abuse and family manipulation, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this isn't your preference, feel free to explore other videos.